Ta'abei doivrei chazav, ishtomi mumoya soev, Adonai. Adonai, necheni v'sit kosech leman shoyder, oi hai shar lefanai darekecha. Hashimei Elohim, yiplu mimoy atzoiseihem, Boroi pishem hadichemoi, ki marva. Ki ata tevarech tzadik Adonai, katzino rotzoin tatrenu. Maybe we'll turn now to Psalm, let's see, Tes Zayin Michtam LeDavid. We'll end with that. Psalm 16, Tes Zayin Michtam LeDavid. Michtam LeDavid, Shomereini El, ki chasi sivach. Likdaishim, asher boretz heima, v'yadirei kal chefzivam. Adonai, menas chelki v'chaysi ata, toy mich gairali. Avoreiches Adonai, asher ye'atzani, aflei lois yiseruni chil yaisai. Lochein samach libi, vayagel kavaydi, af besari yish kein lovetach. Toidieni, oirach echayim, soivas mochoises panecha, neimais biminecha netzach.
here to pay our respects. Kavod Achron. It's a very beloved husband, brother, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and friend to many. Avraham Tzvi ben Elchanan, Alvin Jaffe of blessed memory. I'd like to take a moment to actually work a little backwards, chronologically, if I may. In the last few years of Alvin's life, Alvin was less active. We saw him as a very sweet, elderly gentleman with a very big, beautiful smile. We were just talking even in the Daf Yomi. He used to sit right next to me on my right. At first, when he first came to this year, a little bit more aware of what was going on. Quiet, occasionally a comment. Of course, as time went on, it became more difficult, but he still enjoyed coming and being part of this year. A sense of camaraderie, give his morning a start. It was very important for him. But I'd like to spend a moment just going back a little bit in history. We say every Shabbos in davening, V'chol mi she'oskim b'tzarchei tzibur be'emunah. We talk about those people who are involved in the community with emunah, with faith. Kadosh Baruch Hu yishalem scharam, that God should reward them. That was Alvin. Alvin was the kind of person in his earlier years, for many, many years, who was very active in the community as a leader, whether it was Taylor Road Synagogue, Kashrus Commission, Hebrew Academy, Yabi, BJE, Federation, etc., etc., etc. I've often commented that today in our community, we live in a community that has so much, but we forget that it has so much because of pioneers like Alvin who dedicated themselves selflessly to take care, to see the community grow. That sense of dedication, that sense of selflessness, that willingness to roll up his sleeves and to be involved in so many causes. And I was thinking, and I apologize if I may embarrass Peter just for a moment, but, what does that mean? That means that you take responsibility sometimes for things that you don't necessarily want to do because they're important to get done. And I remember a handful of years ago when we were looking for a president in Young Israel. And I don't know what it was like years ago, but today nobody wants to be president of a shul. I don't think anybody wants to be president of any organization, let alone a shul. But we needed a president, and no one wanted to step up to the plate. And Peter said, I'll do it. No covet, no honor, no pay. If anything, aggravation. But I think that's what he learned from his father. He learned that, things have to get done. That's part of building a community. Building a community takes responsibility and doing things that aren't always popular and aren't always fun. But that's what it is to be involved in the community. That's the concept of Chol Misha Oskim Tzarchei Tzibur Ve'emunah. That's the kind of legacy that Alvin and Yabal L'Chaim, Arlene, taught their children to be involved in the community, to take responsibility for things that go on and helping the community grow. So even though we're years later, and we don't remember all these people that were so active and involved in putting us where we are on the map today, but those are the individuals who really shaped and really deserve credit for where we are. But most importantly to Alvin, it was his family that was crucial and important. His children, grandchildren. I don't know how much he really had the opportunity to get to know his great-grandchildren, but his tremendous love and dedication. But most importantly, that's a very special bond that he and Arlene had. Can't think of a time, actually maybe once or twice, that I would pop in somewhere to see Alvin that Arlene wasn't there by his side, in his room, in the dining hall of Menorah Park, or wherever it was, always by his side. That was the kind of relationship they had for so many years. They were dedicated to each other. Rabbeinu Bechaya writes on the Parsha of Truma, when the pasuk says, "V'yasisa shulchan atzei shitim," you shall build a table, the table where the showbread was put on, made out of atzei shitim. So he quotes a medrash that says from the word shitim, the letters shin, tes, yud, mem. It stands for shalom, tova, yeshua, and mechila. Peace, good, salvation, and forgiveness. And then it goes on and he points out, he quotes an interesting tradition, the tradition that goes back to, he calls it Chasidei Tzarfas. Obviously this goes back a long way, during the times of Rabbeinu Bechaya and earlier. He said they had a tradition that after 120 years, they would take a person's table and use that as the wood to build their aron. And he goes on to explain why was that? Because it's around that table that he sat with his family, taught them the lessons of life, maybe thought about the things he wanted to do in the community, his involvement in the community, his activity in the community, the chesed, the chasadim that he would do in the community. And therefore, that was the way of sort of, that's what you take with you. You don't take with you your assets, your finances. You take with you the legacy of what you taught your children and your grandchildren and your ma'asim tovim and your good deeds. Alvin, you have a lot to take with you. A lot of good that you did. Most importantly, the beautiful family that you raised together with Arlene. But also, all the wonderful things you did for our community that makes our community where it is today. I just want to end by maybe asking Mechila. I was thinking about it even recently. There have been a few times I've been in and out of Menorah Park for different things over the course of the last few weeks. I stopped by a few times. I remember once in particular, as I was getting into my car, I said, whoops, I forgot to stop by just for a second. It would be a long visit. And I looked at my watch and I said, it's either Mincha or Alvin. And maybe I didn't choose correctly, but I went straight to Shul. So I asked Mechila if I didn't visit you enough and give you enough respect. But I really tremendously did respect you for what you did, what you accomplished, and the wonderful family that you raised. Yehi Zichor Baruch, may your memory be a source of blessing, a nechama to Arlene and to the family, and may all that you did for our community stand you in good graces as you faced the Bez in Shalmaila. I'd like to ask Rabbi Ben Susan, the Rav of Taylor Road Synagogue, where Alvin was involved, and president, and involved for so many years.
אדוני עם האדם ותדאהו, בן אנוש ותחשבהו, אדם להבל דמה ימיו כצל עובר. זרמתם שינה יהיו בבוקר כחציל יחלוף, ובוקר יציץ וחלף לערב ימולל ויבש. ימי שנותינו בהם 70 שנה, ואם יגבור 80 שנה, ורובם עמל לאבן כי גס חיש ונעופה. למנות ימינו כנודע ונביא לבב חוכמה, שמור תם וראה ישר כאחרית לאיש שלום. אך אלוהים יפדה נפשי מיד שאול, כי ככני סלע. ודע אדוני נפש עבודה ולא יש מכל החוסים בו, וישוב ועפר על הארץ כשהיה. והרוח תשוב אל האלוהים אשר נתנה. Arlene, Peter, Janet, Dina, and Hal, Tova and Jonathan, the dear grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Jack and Eliezer, we here today gather to mourn a wonderful, wonderful person. A person that I had the schus, the merit to meet and to know from the very first day I came to Cleveland. Alvin to me was a mentor, he was a friend, and he was a fighter for the Jewish community. The way I would describe him would be in the following manner. He was a chacham, a wise man, ohev shalom, rodev shalom. He loved peace, and he made sure there was peace. He was a mechanech, a Jewish educator, and he was an ish chayer, a warrior. Alvin was the spokesman for the Jewish schools in Cleveland. He was a president of the Hebrew schools. He was a president of Taylor Road Synagogue. He was involved wherever there was chinuch. Alvin Jaffe was there. His dear brothers, Arthur alav shalom, was the same way. His dear brother Jack was the same way. In every committee, whether it was budget committee at the Bureau of Jewish Education, whether it was the Budget Committee at the Jewish Federation, whether it was Vada Chinuch, a Jaffe was there. They had to be there to fight for Chinuch, for the children, for the next generation. Arlene, the same way. She worked for many years, spent many, many hours at the Hebrew Academy. She fought for it. And I remember I was talking to her many times about writing grants for foundations. Alvin was the Ish Chayil for the very fact that he brought the Hebrew schools, Yeshivas Adat B'nai Israel, to a very, very successful year. He brought the Hebrew school of the Taylor Road Synagogue to become successful together with other schools. He brought the shalom between the two schools. I remember when we had meetings together. I remember when his dear brother Jack used to come to our board meetings and bring candy, put it on the table to make everybody comfortable. I remember when Arthur burned the mortgage at a Taylor Road Synagogue. And then this is all a tribute to their parents. Their dear parents brought them to that level to understand the Jewish values, to understand chinuch, and what it is to fight for the Hebrew schools. There are two kinds of mechanchim, of Jewish educators. There's one who is a rabbi, who's actually in a classroom, who teaches the child. And then there is a different mechanech, he who makes it possible for that Rebbe to teach Torah, to teach Jewish education. He made it his goal in life. No matter how busy he was, he wanted to make sure that he had time to go to every single meeting and never miss meetings. When the schools, the Hebrew schools, had to present their budget, the first question they asked was, is Alvin Jaffe here? When the answer was yes, they felt better because they knew they had a guarantee from Alvin Jaffe. In today's parsha, this week's parsha, there's one very important pasuk that is a lesson and an example to what Alvin did. The pasuk says, "Kichu mi'itchem truma l'Hashem." Take from what belongs to you, from your property, an offering to Hashem. That means it has to be yours. You can't take somebody else's. Mi'itchem. Kol nediv libo. All those who wanted to donate with their heart, and that's the emphasis, Yavia es trumas Hashem, shall bring it as an offering to Hashem. In other words, it is not enough to give a check to an institution that is nice, that is helpful, but what is good, what is proper, to put your heart into it. And then the apostle goes on saying, Zahav, Kesef, and Choshes, the precious metals, to bring for the construction of the Mishkan. Alvin brought that gold in his heart. I never, ever remember hearing him speak Lashon Hara. Never. always soft-spoken. He always listened carefully. He understood what the problem was. And I must say, the same compliment goes to his brothers. They were all the same. They're all worried what's going to be with the school. What about Jewish education? They wanted to maintain that Jewish continuity to go on and on and on. L'netzach netzachim. That is kol nediv libo, a person who gives something at his heart's desire. The truma, there's no limit. One can give a ton if he wishes, or just 1 grain. Whatever you want, or whatever you give it with your heart. Alvin gave his heart, his mind, his soul, his time, his money, whatever it took to make sure that the schools were successful. I remember, and old memories came back to me when I used to watch him make that budget presentation. And he meant it out of his heart. And he showed people that this is extremely important because this is chinuch. This is for the children. This is for the next generation. He was an adiv libo. He gave it with his heart. He gave that time with his heart, with his lave. There's a tremendous question about who is better, the ayin tov or the left tov. The culmination of all the different characteristic traits in the Mishnah and Pirkei Avos ends with left tov. Why? Because the left tov encompasses everything. The left tov is a good heart, which means everything else. And that was Alvin. Like Rabbi Bernstein said, he always had a smile, always smile on his face. For the last few months, when I went to visit him at Menorah Park, unfortunately, he couldn't speak much. But when I sat down to talk to him, to remind him of the good old days, he looked at me with a smile and wide open eyes. He loved it. Because his ideals, his life was a chinuch. His life was Yiddishkeit. His life was the Jewish values. May I, dear family and friends, express my own loss in Alvin. He was a good friend, and he was a good teacher to me. I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from his midas, how he tackled the problems. I saw him work in the shul setting and in school setting, at the Bureau of Jewish Education, at the Federation. He was always a powerful person, but very, very modest and very, very quiet. He didn't want anybody to thank him because he did it, he thought it's only a normal thing to do. That's why I mentioned before, this is a tribute to his parents. This is how he was raised. To make sure there's Jewish continuity, to make sure there is the next generation, to teach the next generation. May he be a minute yosher to all of you. May he stand before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and daven for all of you for health, happiness, prosperity, longevity. May he pray for his dear wife, for his dear Jack and Eliezer. May he pray for Shalom. Shalom in Israel, which he loved so much. Every time he used to go, he used to tell me, I'm going to see my daughter. And he loved every minute of it. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu take his neshama and keep it close to him, together with all nishmos tzadikim. Amen. Tihi nafsho tzrura b'tzura chaim.
I'd like to ask members of the family, beginning with Peter.
My father was born in 1930. He grew up in a small house near 101st and St. Clair, shared a bedroom and clothes with his 3 brothers. His parents were never well off, but they always worked hard to make sure the kids had what they needed. Dad was a quiet person. He never shared much without a great deal of prodding, so my recollections of stories from his childhood are few. The few that he did offer was about the boys, his brothers, and himself finding a dead body near the creek along Martin Luther King Drive. Talked about the priest's pretty daughter who lived across the street. About not wanting to tell their mother when one of the brothers got hurt. But he never pushed to share his life with us. So much of what we learned came from group conversations when we gathered from the many smachot. What I do know about my father comes from my experiences. My dad and his late brother Arthur, alav hashalom, both married East Coast women. My mother and my Aunt Miriam grew up spending summers at the shore or in the mountains. So my dad and my uncle bought a few acres of property with 2 houses out near Middlefield in 1967 to give them a place to escape the city life. It feels like we spent most every Shabbat out there until 1978 when Arthur was murdered. We did continue to use the place after, but it wasn't the same experience. We finally sold the property in the 90s when my father just couldn't keep up with the maintenance, and Ellie and I had young kids to run after. My dad was very modest, except when it came to professional consulting. He was the best in town, but he didn't need to boast about it. People just knew. He and his partner Hank and the company founder, David Lewin, were the people you called when your office building, parking garage, parking lot, or retaining wall was going up or unexpectedly down. My dad was never interested in talking about shul politics or listening to the latest gossip, but get him started about driving piles for foundations, thickness of the asphalt, slope of a hillside, compaction of the fill, you had him in his glory. Many times we heard about a building owner that was calling them to save the day when the cheaper consultant just wasn't getting it done. My dad's company was the Cadillac of